I wake up every morning as the warm sun rises over the gentle waves of the South China Sea, casting a brilliant golden hue across the vibrant city of Da Nang. The air is always warm and carries the faint, comforting scent of salt mixed with the rich aroma of street food simmering on nearby corners. It is a daily, gentle reminder that I am alive, truly alive, in a place that respects the gray in my hair and the deep lines etched into my face by decades of hard work. This beautiful morning routine stands in stark, almost unbelievable contrast to the life that was being meticulously planned for me just 3 years ago. Back then, my future was being boxed into a sterile room with beige walls, grab bars in the bathroom, and a bleak view of a sprawling parking lot in Columbus, Ohio. I am 67 years old today, though I feel decades younger than I did when I was 64. At 64, my world was rapidly shrinking. I was a man who had spent 32 years working proudly as a carpenter and cabinet maker. My hands were my livelihood, my creative outlet, and my identity. For over 3 decades, those hands had shaped countless homes, built sturdy oak tables for families to gather around during the holidays, and crafted delicate cherry wood cabinets that held generations of treasured memories. I knew the grain of every type of wood, the exact pressure needed to sand a surface to glassy perfection, and the deep satisfaction of stepping back to admire a finished piece that would outlast me. But those same hands, once my greatest tools and my source of immense pride, were slowly and painfully failing me. The relentless, fiery ache of arthritis had settled deep into my joints, twisting my fingers into swollen knots and stripping away my ability to grip a hammer or guide a saw. It did not happen overnight, but rather it was a creeping thief that stole my livelihood piece by piece. First, I could not work full days without my knuckles swelling to twice their size. Then the detailed finish work became impossible. Eventually, even holding a simple screwdriver sent agonizing shocks of pain up my forearms. The loss of my trade left me feeling entirely obsolete in a society that so often seems to value us only as long as we can produce, build, and earn. I was losing my independence, my sense of purpose, and my confidence. And as my physical abilities visibly waned, my family decided it was time to step in. They did not step in to find ways to support my independence or help me adapt to my changing body. Instead, they stepped in to manage my decline. They meant well, or so they repeatedly told themselves and me, but their good intentions felt terrifyingly like a death sentence being handed down by a well-meaning jury. The turning point, the day the bottom completely fell out of my world, was a chilly gray Tuesday in late November. My 3 adult children had arranged what they called a family meeting at my small house in Columbus. I knew something was wrong the moment they all walked in together. Karen, my oldest, is a registered nurse, always practical, always in charge. Brian, my middle child, is an accountant living in Cleveland, a man who sees the world strictly through spreadsheets and bottom lines. Paul, the youngest, works in corporate sales down in Cincinnati, always trying to smooth things over with a polished pitch. They sat me down at the very dining table I had built for our family 20 years prior, a table that held the phantom echoes of Thanksgiving dinners and birthday parties. But on this day, it was a boardroom table for the business of ending my freedom. Karen took the lead. She reached into her neat leather tote bag and pulled out a thick stack of printed notes. I can still hear the dry scrape of the paper as she slid the documents across the smooth wooden surface toward me. They were cost estimates and brochures for assisted living facilities in the Columbus area. She had done her research just like she always did. The brochures featured overly cheerful elderly people smiling brightly while doing water aerobics or holding paintbrushes, images that looked nothing like the reality I knew. The numbers, however, were what truly hit me, like a physical blow. Karen had calculated everything. She pointed to a column on her spreadsheet and explained in her gentle but firm nurse voice that a decent assisted living facility would cost between $5,000 and $7,000 every single month. That was just the base rate. If I needed help with medication management, which they assumed I would eventually, or if my mobility worsened, the cost would climb even higher, easily reaching $8,000 or $9,000 a month. I sat there in stunned silence, my arthritic hands resting on the table I had built as they methodically broke down my financial ruin. My sole income was my Social Security, which amounted to exactly $1,200 per month. I had some modest savings, the kind of savings a working-class carpenter manages to scrape together after raising 3 children and going through a difficult divorce years earlier. But looking at Brian's cold, hard numbers, I realized my entire life savings would be completely wiped out in less than 3 years if I moved into one of those facilities. After that, I would be entirely dependent on them, or worse, transferred to a state-run facility where the conditions were notoriously grim. Brian explained that we needed to sell my house immediately to fund the first few years of this transition. Paul chimed in, using his best sales voice, assuring me that this was the safest, most logical step. The humiliation of that moment is something I will carry with me forever. I was being treated as a problem to be solved, a logistical hurdle, a declining asset that needed to be managed before it became a liability. They spoke about me as if I were not in the room, or as if my cognitive faculties had vanished along with the cartilage in my hands. They loved me, I knew that, but their love was suffocating. In American culture, we warehouse our elders. We hide them away in facilities where they are kept safe from physical harm, but where their spirits are left to quietly wither away in front of blaring televisions. They wanted to keep me safe, but they were taking away my autonomy, my dignity, and my right to live the remaining years of my life on my own terms. I told them I needed time to think, asking them to leave the brochures on the table. After they left, the silence in my house was deafening. I felt entirely trapped, cornered by my failing body and my family's practical, unfeeling mathematics. For weeks, I fell into a deep depression. I stared at those brochures until the smiling faces on the covers made me sick to my stomach. I could not sleep, and the winter cold in Ohio only made the pain in my joints more unbearable. I began spending my nights scouring the internet, desperately searching for an alternative. I searched for places with warmer climates where my arthritis might ease, places where the cost of living would not entirely devour my meager income. That is when I stumbled upon a community of expatriates living in Southeast Asia. The idea seemed absolutely ludicrous at first. I had never traveled outside of North America. I barely knew where Vietnam was on a map. But the more I read, the more the idea took root in my mind. During this frantic period of research, I came across a resource that fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life. I read a book titled You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. The author spoke directly to the fear of aging in a society that discards its elders, and he challenged the notion that our final chapters must be written in the margins of someone else's life. Reading You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker was like having a window thrown open in a dark, stuffy room. It gave me the vocabulary to understand my own rebellion. The book argued that seeking out a new beginning in a culture that reveres age is not running away. It is a profound act of self-preservation and reclamation of dignity. I read it cover to cover 3 times, and with each reading my resolve solidified. I was not going to a home in Ohio. I was going to Vietnam. When I called the family back together to announce my decision, the reaction was exactly what you would expect. It was a mixture of shock, anger, and profound disbelief. Karen cried, accusing me of being reckless and delusional. Brian demanded to see a financial plan, arguing that the healthcare system in a developing country would be the death of me. Paul simply thought I was having a late life crisis. They brought up the distance, the language barrier, the humidity, and the lack of Western conveniences. They tried every emotional and logical tactic to change my mind. But I held firm. I told them that I would rather take a risk and truly live for a few more years than safely rot away in a beige room waiting for the end. I sold my house, downsized my entire existence into 2 large suitcases, and boarded a plane to a country I had never seen. The journey was exhausting, a blur of airports, bad coffee, and endless hours in cramped seats. When I finally stepped out of the airport terminal in Da Nang, the heat and humidity hit me like a physical force, but it was not oppressive. It was an embrace. The city was a chaotic, beautiful symphony of zooming motorbikes, vibrant street markets, and towering modern buildings standing alongside ancient temples. Da Nang is incredibly modern, flat, and walkable, bordered by lush mountains on one side and an endless stretch of pristine beach on the other. It was exactly what I needed. For the first time in years, the biting cold in my bones was completely gone. Let me break down the financial reality of my new life, because this is what truly shocked my son, Brian. In Columbus, my Social Security of $1,200 was not enough to even cover rent in a safe neighborhood, let alone groceries, utilities, and health care. Here in Da Nang, that exact same amount allows me to live not just comfortably, but beautifully. I rent a spacious, modern, fully furnished apartment with a balcony overlooking the ocean for exactly $350 a month. My utility bills, including high-speed internet and air conditioning, rarely exceed $50. I eat incredibly fresh, delicious, and healthy food every single day. Most of my meals are from local markets or small family-run restaurants, and I spend perhaps $10 or $15 a day on food. A bowl of steaming, fragrant pho costs about $2. A fresh banh mi sandwich is less than $1. My total monthly expenses, including regular massages to help with my arthritis, come to about $800. This leaves me with $400 of disposable income every single month, allowing me to save money, travel around the region, and enjoy my life without the constant, crushing anxiety of impending bankruptcy. Beyond the financial relief, the transformation in my physical and mental health has been nothing short of miraculous. The warm climate and the fresh anti-inflammatory diet of vegetables, seafood, and herbs have drastically reduced the swelling in my joints. I walk miles every day along the beach promenade, something that would have been completely impossible in the Ohio winter. I still cannot build cabinets, but my hands no longer dictate my mood or my limitations. I remembered the words from You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker, which emphasized that environment dictates health just as much as genetics. The book was right. By changing my environment, I fundamentally changed my physical reality. I am no longer a patient to be managed. I am an active participant in my own vibrant life. Building a community here took time and effort, but it was incredibly rewarding. Vietnamese culture is deeply rooted in respect for elders. When I walked down the street, I am not invisible, nor am I seen as a burden. Young people offer me smiles, vendors greet me warmly, and neighbors look out for me. There is a profound dignity in aging here. I also connected with a wonderful group of expatriates from all over the world who, like me, refuse to accept the default narrative of aging in the West. We share meals, stories, and support each other. Of course, it has not always been easy. The language is incredibly difficult to learn, and navigating the visa regulations can be frustrating. The summer heat can sometimes be intense. But these are minor inconveniences compared to the total loss of autonomy I was facing back home. The most profound validation of my choice came 18 months after I moved. My daughter Karen finally agreed to visit me. She had been highly skeptical and worried sick for a year and a half, convinced she would find me living in squalor or struggling with my health. When I met her at the airport, she stopped dead in her tracks. I was deeply tanned, walking without a limp, and smiling in a way she had not seen since before my arthritis took hold. I took her to my favorite local spots, introduced her to my Vietnamese neighbors, and showed her my beautiful apartment overlooking the sea. On the third day of her visit, as we were sitting at a small plastic table on the sidewalk, eating incredibly fresh spring rolls, Karen suddenly broke down in tears. She reached across the table, took my gnarled but pain-free hands in hers, and wept. She apologized for the family meeting, for the brochures, and for trying to force me into a life I did not want. She told me she had never seen me so healthy, so vibrant, and so happy. It was the closure and the understanding I had desperately hoped for. I am sharing my story today for anyone out there who is facing the same terrifying pressure from their family. If your children are holding family meetings, printing out cost estimates for assisted living, and talking about you as if your life is effectively over, please know that you have choices. You do not have to accept the warehousing of your twilight years. You do not have to bankrupt yourself for the privilege of losing your freedom. There is a whole wide world out there that respects and honors age, where your retirement income can provide a beautiful, dignified life. It takes courage to step into the unknown, to face the criticism of those who love you, but do not understand your needs, and to demand the right to live fully until the very end. If you are feeling trapped and looking for the same inspiration that helped me break free, I highly recommend finding that same courage. As I mentioned earlier, the perspective I gained from You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker was the catalyst for my entire journey. If you want to read it for yourself, the link is in the comments. Please do not let me know how much they love you or write your ending to your story without your permission. Reclaim your autonomy, protect your dignity, and remember that there is always another chapter waiting to be written. Perhaps on a sunny beach, thousands of miles from the cold reality you thought you were bound to.